Hello, my friends. Welcome to Austin and I's kitchen. We are in the middle of a really cool project. These are all things we grew in our garden, and we're going to use them to make a garden variety Italian stew. Now, an Italian stew in a traditional sense is a, thickish soup-like thing with a tomato base and some cooked up vegetables in it. Kind of like if you imagine a minestrone soup, if you've ever had that, but without the noodles. Now, like lots of things, soup and whatnot, there are many different ways to make it, and we're going to make ours just using whatever we grew in our garden. So we have a whole bunch of eggplant, lots of weirdly shaped tiny little ones. We have some zucchini. There are two normally sized ones and one irrationally large one that was hiding, and we didn't see it until it got huge. We have two types of tomatoes. These are called yellow pear tomatoes, and these are called green zebra. Look at the pattern on these. Aren't they beautiful? And we have basil, and some garlic, and some potatoes, and some green onions. And we grew all of those things. The very first step we're going to do is to cut the green onions and cut the garlic really small, mince it up, and then we're going to saute those in a pan. And we'll check back in a little bit and see what's next. So if you want, at the end of this, maybe you'd like to try making an Italian stew with your folks at your house. If not, could be fun to watch anyway. We're going to talk a little bit about some science while we're doing it, and it's really neat that it's all from the garden. You could grow all of these things at your house next year if you have a garden. Or maybe we'll grow them at school next year in our garden together. All right, my friends, I'm going to go chop some green onions and garlic, and I will see you in a minute. Alrighty, my friends, we're about to cut up the green onions. We actually grew these in our yard from green onions at the store. So we bought green onions from the store, and we cut them, right about where the white starts, and we used up all the green part, and we buried the little bulb part, the white bit left that still had the baby roots on it, in the ground. And those grew and we chopped them, and those grew and we chopped them, and we did that all summer long. But left a few. And so the ones that are left turned into these big, giant monster things, which aren't very good for, chopping tiny bits up and sprinkling them on a nacho anymore because they got huge. But they're going to be awesome used in a soup. So Austin's in charge of cutting these up. He's going to start on that.
Take it to about here usually.
Go ahead. So if you're following along with us, your next step is to chop a bunch of green onions. And while he's doing that, hi Esri, I'm going to be chopping up this big pile of eggplant. And Austin did a test one for me because I always like to have an example of how I'm supposed to cut them up. I'm going to get started on that, and we'll be right back. Hello again. We are back with a giant pile of chopped up eggplant, and Austin is still working on the green onions. But I saw something amazing I have to show you. So you may have noticed that sometimes when you get an eggplant in the store, they can be pretty big, like, almost the size of this knife, like really big. And ours were not that large. One reason ours aren't that large is because our plant is small, so it can't produce fruit that is quite as big. And the other is that we discovered we kind of like how they taste better if they're a little younger, if they didn't get as old. This one in particular, we harvested really early, like maybe even a little too early. You know how I can tell? Do you see those ridiculously tiny speckles? Let's see if we can get it to focus. There we go. Those little tiny spots. Those little tiny spots, if we gave this eggplant another couple days, would be looking a whole lot more like this. They're a lot more recognizable now, aren't they? Those are all the seeds. Because I was using a nice sharp knife and the seeds were not hard, you can see the outside of the seed and the inside. You can see the little seed coat that protects the seed when it's out in nature. Like if this eggplant grew in an abandoned field and nobody harvested it and it fell to the ground and the eggplant rotted and turned to mush and just the seeds were left sitting behind, that's when that seed coat would come in handy. Check this out one more time. Tiny little proto-seeds that never got to develop. You can see even on this eggplant how it has some of both. It has some of those tiny little seedlings that didn't get started, baby seeds, not seedlings, that's a baby plant. And then it has a small one and some bigger ones. All right, Austin's done with the green onions. It looks like this. Austin, are you going to use this part too?
No, they're very kind of fiery and sharp tasting.
Okay, so this part of the green onion got a little too spicy. So we're gonna use this part and we'll check back again in a minute. Okay, Austin is working on mincing some garlic and I am in charge of tomatoes. So I'm going to cut them all about this size. Then we're going to put the eggplant in one pan and get it cooked. Meanwhile, in another pan, the onion and the garlic are gonna cook. And when the onion and garlic are looking pretty done, we're gonna chuck the tomatoes in on top so they can all cook together just a little bit. I'll see you again when we're done with those things. Bye. Hello again, everybody. This is our onion and garlic and slightly cooked tomatoes that we did in a pan. This is the pan where that happened, which is now full of chicken broth. That is one of the two things we're using that didn't come from our garden. You could use vegetable broth too if your family doesn't eat meat. And Austin swished the chicken broth around in that pan with the little bits of garlic and onion that were stuck, so all that good flavor would end up in our soup instead of in the pan.
Deglazing.
It's called deglazing. Here's these guys again, and here's the eggplant. Now, if you look at the eggplant, you can see that it hasn't gone like completely floppy yet. It's not fully cooked. We put it in a really hot pan with a little bit of oil so that it would get all nice and browned, but it's gonna end up cooking in the stew, so it doesn't need to be all the way cooked. Austin is peeling potatoes, and then we're gonna cut the potatoes, throw all these things, the eggplant, the tomatoes and onions and garlic, the broth, the potatoes, and a can of tomato sauce, again, the second thing not from our garden, into a pot and cook them. So we'll be back to check on that in just a minute. Alrighty, folks, we have some chopped potatoes. Austin is working on chiffonading the basil, which is a fancy word that means lay all the leaves on top of each other, roll them up into a tube, and then slice them into ribbons off the tube.
It's also literally French for ribbons.
Well, there we go. It's French for ribbons. That's pretty cool. So Austin's doing that to the basil. Here's our mess of onion, garlic, and tomato. Here's our wee little can of tomato sauce that Austin says should probably have been tomato paste, but we didn't have any. There's some more chicken broth and our eggplant and salt and pepper. And we're gonna throw them all in this pot and cook them. If you were trying to do this at home and you had an Instant Pot or a, what are they called, Austin?
Slow cooker.
A slow cooker, thank you. If you had one of those, you could cook it in that. Or if you wanted to just do it in a pot on the stove, you could do that too. So all of this goes in all together, and all we're saving to put in at the end is zucchini. Here is everything in the pot. Austin decided that we needed a tiny shake of cayenne, so he's adding that. And we're gonna get going on this thing. I need to direct you to my list. These are the things that I forgot to tell you in 4 other videos. So, the garlic came from our garden at school. Maybe you remember when a few of you went shopping and got some garlic for a cooking project and there was leftover and it started to sprout and we stuck it in the ground? That is the garlic that garlic grew the garlic that we used in this. For onions, probably you won't have an irrationally large pile of green onions around your house because you probably didn't grow crazy huge green onions in your garden. A regular white or yellow onion would work totally fine and is probably what a more traditional recipe would have anyway. And we did stuff at the same time in different pans, but if you only have one good pan, you can do them one after another after another. Here is the delicious stuff in the pot. We're gonna start cooking it. Austin's adding the last of that broth that was in the pan to get all the good onion bits. It looks about this full. Do we feel like that's enough liquid?
I know the eggplant will cook down and get smaller, but I still feel like just a little bit of water.
Just to make sure
just
that
to
it doesn't go
cover.
dry. All right, we will check back in a little bit. And remember, you still should have zucchini sitting on your counter if you're doing this. The zucchini shouldn't go in yet because zucchini cooks really quickly and will turn to mush. This is a giant zucchini saying hello, not a spaceship, a giant zucchini. It should still be on your counter. We'll see you in a bit. Hi folks, here is the next step in our garden Italian stew. This is getting a little bit of salt added because it felt like it didn't have enough. We're going to put the zucchini in and cook it on low for a little bit until the zucchini's, how we want it, and then we'll be ready to taste it. Hi friends, here's our finished stew. Austin decided to add a little bit of oregano to it. We cooked it a while to get the zucchini cooked, although I think it should be a little more cooked, so that'll probably happen soon. And we discovered that we cooked the eggplant a little too long, so next time we're going to wait to put the eggplant in until it's partly done. That being said, if you decide to make anything like this, I would love to see a picture of what you make, or you could even make a video like we did talking about what went into it and what steps you took. If you want to follow up, which would be a good idea, you could think about maybe some of the things we talked about plants. Could you invent a science experiment to do? Could you label the parts of a flower and then draw a diagram of how those change as the flower develops into the fruit? Maybe you want to make a graph of, say 10 different recipes you find on the internet for Italian garden stew, or just Italian stew. Maybe you want to search that, copy down all the ingredients for 10 recipes, and find out which things occur in the most recipes. Maybe you want to pick a random country, say, how about Argentina? And type in stew from Argentina or Argentinian stew and see what comes up. It would be really interesting to actually do a research on stew from a different country, because basically everywhere has some kind of stew. Stew just means stuff in a pot, like a thicker soup. However you decide you want to follow up, whether it's in a botany way, or a cooking way, or a geography way, or a writing way, or anything else you can think of, go for it, my friends. Have a good day, do interesting work, and I'll see you around. Bye.